What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday we had an interesting collaboration announced for Nintendo and the Pokemon Company for the Switch that certainly makes a callback to something like the Game Boy printer or even the Pokemon Snap Station, and we'll go over that one here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt as they decided to share sales numbers online for the game, and that went over pretty well online. Oh, and we're also going to talk about Returnal, because while it's flying under the radar for a lot of people right now, we had a ton of previews and impressions shared this week, and the more I keep seeing this game, the better it looks. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with a story from yesterday, which was that video pass from Sony that appeared to be leaked out early online for on PlayStation Store in Poland. It does appear that this is something they will be doing a trial run with in Poland specifically, kind of testing out in a certain region. And this is a possibility I had mentioned yesterday, but we do have official confirmation of this now. And we can actually head over here to Push Square, where they did get a quote, this from Nick McGuire, who is Sony Global Services Vice President, saying, "We know very well that we have a large base of players in Poland who stand out due to their commitment and activity in the network and social media. They also like to use VOD platforms. For us, this is the perfect combination, the perfect market to introduce a test service as part of the PlayStation Plus program and see what our key users think about it," which means I guess they're just going to run this for a certain amount of time, get a bunch of feedback through surveys, and see if the people who got this movie pass tacked on to PlayStation Plus felt like it added any significant value. At least for now, it appeared to be a year-long trial that they were going to have kind of tacked on. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a year until we see this go everywhere else. It could be something they test for a few months, and you just get that full year as like compensation for helping out. But we'll see if this is something that expands outwards. For now, though, it looks like there's going to be testing it in a certain region. Also, we did have a new publishing partnership announced by Sony, and we can head over to the website where they posted this up, saying PlayStation and Firewalk Studios announced publishing partnership for a new original multiplayer IP. And what's really cool about this, you can see actually a little graphic they put out here that this has Firewalk Studios and Sony, but then to the left we have Probably Monsters. And at Firewalk, they actually have a lot of developers from Bungie and Destiny, and that means we could see actually a pretty cool original IP, big AAA budget apparently being signed here with Sony for this game. And it's something that Sony, I'm sure, could really use here as they go through with the PlayStation 5 generation, because when we think of Sony, we think of these like big AAA single-player narrative-driven experiences, not as much on like the multiplayer side. I kind of feel like if I think of multiplayer, I think more or less of either a third party, or if it comes down to first party, like platform holders, probably Microsoft with a lot of things they've been doing, whether it's like Halo or Sea of Thieves or Gears of War. Those are all fairly large games when it comes to online multiplayer. So I think it's a good idea for Sony, if they're not going to be developing a lot of these big multiplayer IPs in-house necessarily, to start looking around and signing some publishing deals like this, especially with a studio that's kind of put together with a lot of ex-Bungie developers here. They could come up with something really cool. Oh, and here's an interesting announcement. It looks like Battlefield will actually be coming to mobile devices. What happened here was EA put up this fairly large blog post talking about how we're getting closer and closer to the big new Battlefield game that's going to be apparently targeting next-gen consoles. That's coming up pretty soon, but they also wanted to let us know that they are looking into mobile devices like cell phones and tablets. This is actually what they posted up on their website, saying, it's always been our vision to bring Battlefield to more platforms. So after years of prototyping, I'm super happy to be able to let you know that our friends at Industrial Toys, working closely with all of us here at DICE, are developing a completely new Battlefield game, bringing all-out warfare to smartphones and tablets in 2022. They go on a bit further to talk about how this isn't like going to be a cut-down Battlefield game. This is going to be like a full-fledged Battlefield game on like your cell phone or your tablet or any of that. And it's interesting to think that, because Battlefield, when we think of Battlefield, we think of these big, massive, sprawling battles that are going on. So yeah, putting that on a cell phone should be kind of interesting. I mean, like Fortnite's obviously on phones. That's generally pretty large with the amount of people kind of playing in like one game. Then also you have Call of Duty Mobile that's been very successful. And I'm sure EA recognizes this and they're thinking, okay, can we get Battlefield there? Well, it looks like they're going to take a shot at it in 2022. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this collaboration between Nintendo and Fujifilm. And when I first saw this, I immediately thought of the Game Boy printer. And I wasn't alone, because I saw lot of people mention that. And back in the day, you had the original Game Boy, or the Game Boy Color if you're one of the cool kids, and you had like the Game Boy camera, and that would allow you to take pictures that looked terrible, but it was really cool at the time to be able to take pictures with our Game Boy, right? But you also could get the printer, which was basically a receipt printer that attempted to print out stuff you took pictures of with the camera, and it all looked terrible now by today's standards, but it was cool back then. And after I saw this trailer here, I immediately started thinking of that. The idea is apparently by the end of this month, on April 30th, they will have an application that will allow you to transfer different pictures from your Switch to this printer that's called the Instax Mini Link. It's for the Nintendo Switch. Use a QR code on your Switch, then go to your cell phone, then print it out on this little printer here. The app contains filters and 59 different frames. That includes from games like Super Mario, Animal Crossing, and yes, even Pokemon Snap. In fact, that's the thing that I thought of immediately, was like, oh, this makes a ton of sense for Pokemon Snap, considering you're going to be taking a ton of pictures in that game. Now, they also appear to have a specially themed Instax printer, as well as this little Pikachu casing for it. I don't know the quality of this device, because this isn't necessarily a new device from Fujifilm. They've had these before, and generally they're about $100. And there's also a case bundle that comes with this Pikachu case in May, and that'll be $120 overall. And the way I look at this is they're just trying to make it easier for you to print out different screenshots and pictures from your Switch, whereas I guess before you would post it on Twitter, and then you would take it from there to your computer, and then you would print it out on your printer, and then you have to make sure you have the right kind of paper and all of this. This is just kind of trying to cut all of that down, and you just mostly use your cell phone. It doesn't appear that it syncs up to your Switch necessarily. Your Switch with the QR code then sends it to your phone, which then sends it to the printer, which means, because I saw people ask this, was this what that Bluetooth update was for? Was it for this Instax printer? Apparently not. That's what I'll tell you now. That this does not appear to be what a lot of that Bluetooth updating was for, which does still make me wonder what we could be seeing from Nintendo here leading up to E3. But I like the idea of this. I don't think I'm going to get it myself, but for people who are fans of like going to Blockbuster and using the Pokemon Snap station for Pokemon Snap and the pictures they were taking, I think they'll be looking into this. And again, it makes a lot of sense for when they're launching it literally the same day as Pokemon Snap. So a cool idea here, I would say, for what Nintendo is doing with the Switch and Pokemon Snap. But let me know if you thought of this and you immediately thought back to that Game Boy printer, especially if you had one. It's interesting to see how things have evolved over the years, right? Next up, let's talk about CD Projekt and Cyberpunk 2077, which is one of the wildest launches I think I've ever seen in gaming, especially from a company that's built up such a good reputation with gamers. That's CD Projekt and CD Projekt Red. Well, they decided to share how many copies of Cyberpunk 2077 they had sold in 2020. So that doesn't include the last 4 months, right, in 2021. And we can see this tweet here where they say 13.7 plus million copies were sold in 2020. And all right, well, a lot of people saw that as them technically celebrating, which, yeah, I would probably open Photoshop for that as well, with how bad the launch was, and you still sell over 13 million copies. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, they had a lot of copies refunded, right? Well, not necessarily. If you go over here to gamesindustry.biz, they say CD Projekt refunded around 30,000 copies of Cyberpunk 2077, showing that, well, not a lot of people took them up on the offer for a refund. Now, again, this seems to be just through 2020, and the window that they had was only set up for like a week or two, but retailers did at least set up a way for you to refund through them and return a copy. So I don't know, it probably takes a bit longer to get the copies then back. I don't know if they just ship them back to CD Projekt. Maybe they're not counting those, but even if they did, and that was a whole thing, I don't think it would spike to millions of copies all of a sudden, which shows that, yeah, I mean, they launched a buggy and broken game that certainly wasn't even ready for the consoles it was supposed to be launching on, that being the PS4 and the Xbox One, since there was talks about the PS5 and Xbox Series systems maybe not even coming out in that same year in 2020 and being delayed to 2021 or something. Well, though it came out, it was all over the place. There were serious issues with the game just working, and they still sold over 13 million copies. So, lesson learned. And I had made a joke about this on Twitter about how it did really well in early access, and when it does launch, it's gonna take the world by storm. And I think they're gonna make a big deal about them launching again, because think about it this way. This is without the PlayStation Store. Even though they say they sold like 26% or something like that on the PlayStation Store, that was before it was pulled down. So once it gets added back to the PlayStation Store with the nice little PS5 logo on the box, they're gonna have a whole other launch with this game, and they're gonna promote it like that. But I'll be curious to see how many people go back to it when they do have this next-gen version out. And the big question is, I get their sales numbers here. Yes, it was successful. Technically, it's made money already. They broke even like immediately. But then we got to look forward to the future. Will what happened here with Cyberpunk hurt the build up to something like Witcher 4? Or will people look at that and say, well, it's not Cyberpunk, it's different? I mean, there are still going to be a lot of people who are going to be skeptical of CD Projekt and CD Projekt Red, and it's their job to win the consumers back. But I guess we'll find out when they show us Witcher 4 if people remember what happened here with Cyberpunk, because either way, it seems like 13.7 million copies so far have sold, and I think it's just going to continue up from there. So even though a lot of people lost trust in CD Projekt and CD Projekt Red with that release, well, they still made a ton of money, and what's that really telling the industry then? Next up, let's talk about Returnal on the PlayStation 5. This being a brand new game from Housemarque, who really worked on the things like Resogun, so you see this game pop up and you're like, wow, that looks way more involved than anything they have done. And a lot of people have been pretty skeptical on this one. I mean, it is a $70 game, and from what they've shown so far, which hasn't been that in-depth, I mean, they've shown some stuff, but like really going hands-on with gameplay for people who don't necessarily work at Housemarque, that's something that they probably should have done a bit more with, and I was happy to see all of a sudden a bunch of embargoes lift and previews with impressions started to go up, and we have like an hour-long video of just people playing this game, and it looks really good. I'm very happy about that because I think Housemarque really has a good shot at showing off what they can do with a bigger budget, and it looks like they are seizing that opportunity here. I checked out several different videos, but I think the one that I liked the most was from SkillUp, and if you're trying to figure out if this is a game that you should be interested in, I would start with that one and then start to kind of make the rounds of some of the longer gameplay sessions. But it is, as has been described, kind of like a roguelike or roguelite game where when you die, you come back, and you try to just progress a little bit further as you go through different sections of these games that are like biomes, and it looks like the settings will be different. So like in this first one that's really been shown in the preview footage, it was like this really dark kind of cave area, but then you go out into places like a desert it looked like, so there are different settings as well, and the gameplay itself looks really fast, looks really responsive, and a ton of fun. There are also talks of like Metroidvania elements where as you progress further, you'll get different items that you keep and will allow you to get into parts of the map that you couldn't previously, like a grappling hook or ways to break down different barriers or obstacles in front of you. So there's a lot of different things you can do when it comes to exploration in the game, and it looks like there's a ton of things dropping, weapons all over the place, passive abilities, different ways to get you further and further through these different runs, as well as these first-person views where you do more story-based stuff. I gotta say, all this stuff that really is coming out now has me pretty excited for Returnal, and that's out next week on the 30th, same day as Pokemon Snap. So it's gonna be interesting for me juggling these two games and trying to get through at least some of them before the podcast on Saturday, but I'm really looking forward to Returnal after seeing a lot of these impressions and previews. So exciting stuff there for Housemarque. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Xbox FPS Boost. We had mentioned this before when we saw games like Prey and Dishonored get bumped from 30 frames per second up to 60 frames per second, and really taking advantage of that extra power that's coming with the Series X and the Series S with the better CPUs. But it looks like now we're moving up to 120 hertz, 120 frames per second. Check this out here. This was a whole chart and also a graphic that was put out over on MajorNelson.com, where we can see, starting from the top, we have games like Battlefield 1, Battlefield 4, and Battlefield 5 all seeing 120 hertz support on the Xbox Series X, and even games like Battlefield 4 seeing support for 120 hertz on the Series S. To go a little further, it looks like a lot of these are EA games, but it does include Titanfall 2 seeing 120 hertz on the Series S and the Series X. That is exciting stuff here. I really like this focus on frame rate. Really, it's cool to see them going back, and I know these are older games we've already played, but to get a more responsive Titanfall 2 on something like the consoles, which is really good on PC, so to see it kind of coming over here to like the Xbox Series X and the Series S is exciting stuff, and it's cool to see Microsoft actually care about frame rate as opposed to just caring about resolution all the time, because that's felt like, I guess, the path we were on for a while now, especially last generation. It was all about 4K and 30 frames per second. But after seeing what some of these third-party companies have done with some of their games, even like Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, the one that came out on the PS5 and the Series X, touching 120 frames, it's just good to see frame rate come into the discussion here, even to the point where through backwards compatibility, we're seeing these games just run way smoother than we did last gen. And it's actually worth going back and playing these games if you're getting these higher frame rates overall. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, did the previews of Returnal make you more interested in the game? 31% of you said, yes, it looks better than I thought. 60% of you still said, no, I'm not that interested. And then 9% said I was already sold on the game. Okay, so like 40% are a bit more interested or already sold on the game. That's not too bad. I've seen a lot of people just not interested in this game, and I still think a lot of that has to do with the pricing. Like, let me ask you this in the comments. If Returnal was $40 and they had announced that, a while ago when they first showed it, or even it came out when the release date happened and it went up on retailers for pre-order, would you be more interested in the game? Is it really that $70 price that I see a lot of people mention attached to Returnal that's making people second guess this game? Because it looks really, really fun, but I guess, does it look $70 fun for a lot of people? That's the question. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Michael saying, one thing I can think of using the AI to play for you, grinding. Yeah, like grinding or farming, I guess. But even then, if I'm someone creating a game, do I really want people to be so turned off by the idea of grinding up levels or something that I'm putting in the game that they want like an AI to control it for them? Grinding in games certainly it feels kind of archaic now for some of these different games, because it's the point where people don't feel like playing it. And that's something that's, I think, tough to figure out when it comes to developing some of these games, especially like JRPGs or action RPGs. Like, all right, trying to figure out their progression through it so they don't have to then go around and just hunt down different enemies and stuff specifically to level up for different story events. But I guess technically, yeah, you could just leave the AI on overnight, come back the next day, and you're like level 99. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's this interesting collaboration between Nintendo and Fujifilm with this Instax printer for the Switch through your cell phone. Did you get Game Boy printer vibes as well? Let me know about that one. And then also, what about CD Projekt announcing 13.7 million units sold for Cyberpunk 2077? It is like the first month and a half. How do you think that looks to the rest of the gaming industry there? And then what about Returnal? I know a lot of people are looking past this game, but did those previews make you kind of take another look? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time for Newswave.